Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Tony Sirianni podcast. I am very happy to have my friend Mindy Diamond, who's the founder and CEO of Diamond Consultants, right, with us today. Welcome, Mindy.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So we get a chance to talk a lot, but we don't get a chance necessarily to talk in front of, thousands of people. So why don't you help out folks who may not know your background? Tell a little bit about how you got here.
Yeah. So thank you. And thank you for having me.
Sure.
So I started Diamond Consultants literally on my bedroom floor 30 years ago. I can't believe it's 30 years. And today my two sons are in the business. They're our next gen team, and we're really become probably the leading search and consulting firm in the financial advisor recruiting space. But essentially, my background, I was a big eight, I'm dating myself, not big four, but big eight public accounting staff accountant, and hated it and failed at it miserably, and went to an accounting search firm looking for a job and found my passion, loved it, and then started this business 30 years ago.
And there can't have been a lot of women doing starting businesses like that back then.
So the answer is definitely not. There wasn't. And my first foray into it, I remember about a year into doing it on Wall Street, the trade publication in those days had done the Recruiters Roundtable, and it was all men. And I would, that was aspirational for me. Oh my God, to ever be included in that. And I would watch it come out, and I would put my hand over the answers to see if I could answer them. And not only could I answer them, but I could answer them better than everybody
All
else.
right.
And to have been asked to be a part of that was really cool. But yes, it's been an awesome thing to be a successful woman in a very male-dominated field.
Well, it's one of those things we have, I always say it, my favorite event that we do, and we do a bunch of events, is the women's event. There's just a sense of, the mentorship, there's just a lot of, I mean, we drink a lot of white wine, but there's a lot of camaraderie, and it just feels great, being there. And clearly, women are open to learning from each other and, helping each other.
Yeah, well, I think in a lot of ways, women are incredibly well suited for this business.
Oh,
The
yeah.
women I've been privileged enough to counsel are pretty spectacular. They've had to work harder in a lot of cases than their male counterparts, and they're just naturally not only collaborative and wanting to teach the next generation or share best practices with others, but they're naturally relationship driven and objective and hungry and smart and scrappy, and still in a lot of cases
And,
managing their home lives
you know,
as
it's a thing. When I was a manager and even talking to women at our events, it's harder to get women to come in and join than it is for them to succeed once they're here. They don't love the commission aspect of it, So hey, if I have a job here for 90 grand a year, you're telling me I can make 200, but I'm only getting 50. They don't love that. They don't, and you started a commission, but you did a business, right? So it's it's that's been sort of a hard point. And I would have to agree with you. Once women are in it, the fact that they listen, and this is probably all could be misconstrued, but I feel men are doing a lot of transaction-oriented stuff, and women are really set up to do the kind of business we do today. The listening, it's
yeah.
empathetic to a point, and educating, teaching, and this they put the time and they spend the time to do it. So they're really good producers and quality producers. When they succeed, it's like
They
no,
don't think of
like,
themselves as producers. They would bristle at that word.
right.
They think of themselves as stewards, as consultants, as guides, as partners, as outsourced CFOs. And yeah, it's a wonderful career for a woman because you've got a lot of freedom and a lot of agency over your professional life, and you can make a whole lot of money if you're great at it.
And it's good for your family too. I mean and that's part of, when the, so I want to talk about the book, which I have here, right? So enjoyed reading the book, and there's just a lot of interesting. You don't have to be looking to move your practice somewhere else to I think to get stuff out of the book. And one of the things you talked about agency, and I always talk about enterprise value, and making something for the next generation. I mean, that's important for everybody, men and women, or anybody who wants to be in this business. I mean, entrepreneurship is, you feel like it's kind of dying out there, but it's so alive in our business, so much a part of what we do.
Yeah. So the book is called Should I Stay or Should I Go? And despite the title, it's not at all written to suggest that anyone moves or nor to presume that everybody should or will. It was really written to help top advisors think about how to optimize their business and suggesting that they walk through what we call a self-assessment, a lot of which I detail in the book, by asking themselves the right questions to first and foremost get a real sense of their true north. What's most important to them? What are their goals? What are they looking to solve for? What does their business ideally look like at the end of the day? How can they best maximize its enterprise value? And then determine if by staying put, if the status quo will enable them to get there or whatever there is. It is, I wrote it because I really felt, I mean, it was a real knowledge gap for advisors of all shapes and sizes in how to really think about how to assess whether they're in the right place, whether they're really well set up to meet their goals and maximize their value.
Well, so many advisors, put their head down and work, and they don't take the step back, right? To say, what am I working on? What am I doing? Where's this going? It's hard.
Well, and it's so partly they do that because they are comfortably, in a lot of cases, comfortably uncomfortable, either comfortably comfortable or comfortably uncomfortable.
Right.
But it's good enough. It's good enough because they're making a lot of money. It's good enough because they have agency over their life. It's good enough because they have the freedom to coach their son's soccer game or take their kids to the tutor or whatever it may be. And good enough because they feel that they're able to serve clients the way they want to. But here's what happens a lot of the time. As the industry landscape has expanded, and it has a lot of advisors are just, they presume that what they have access to or the environment where they sit today is the best there is, even if it's imperfect. And it's not until they go out and either get themselves educated or begin to understand what else is possible that they begin to challenge whether the status quo is ideal. And again, that doesn't mean that everybody should move. It means that every advisor, though, should empower themselves to say, whether I work for a big firm or I'm fully independent, I'm running a franchise, I'm running a business. That business has real value. I'm thinking about the business as a business, and I have the right to determine my future. I have agency over my future. What direction do I want to take? And can I best achieve my goals here, or do I need to go elsewhere? And if I go elsewhere, where would I go?
Yeah, that self-assessment part is the key, right? Because when you do that and then then you sit around, you feel like, well, in your self-assessment, and the book kind of helps you go into it, you might be somebody who's suited to a wirehouse, or you might be somebody who's suited to it. You don't, until you do an honest assessment of where you're at and what you like, what you don't like, it's really hard. You're not going to make a good informed decision. And I imagine that for you as a recruiter, you'd rather work with someone who knows what they want, or at least you can help guide them to what they want, than is all over the place, right?
Well, and it's not so much about what I would want to do, but it's much more about the fact that a good due diligence starts with running parallel tracks. It starts with that self-assessment for someone to know themselves and really be clear about what they want, but simultaneously have someone or some way of educating themselves about what the options look like. One without the other doesn't do you a whole lot of good. If you have the information about what you want, but you don't really understand what's possible or how to assess what you have, it doesn't do you any good. And so many advisors go about, they get a call from a manager at another firm or a recruiter like me who says, hey, I've got some hot opportunity. They take the meeting. Before they know it, they've had 10 meetings, whether it be multiple meetings with one firm or 10 meetings with 10 different firms, and they're more confused than ever. That's actually, we get a lot of calls from advisors at that point where they're overwhelmed because they've got a lot of information, because every manager, every recruiter is telling them a positive story, but there's nobody to really objectify what the truth is. and to help them to really compare it to their own goals. So everything in every case should start with real clarity about what's important to the advisor. And we talk in the book about how that's an exercise someone should do every year. That doesn't mean they should move every year, but every year, whether it be January 1 or mid-June or something of the sort, every advisor should challenge the status quo to look at what they have, get clear on their own goals, compare the two, decide if there's daylight. And if there's daylight, how much daylight, how impactful is that daylight, and what do you want to do about it?
Well, so that brings up the point. So how would you, if you're an advisor, how do you recommend they use the book? I mean, what should they what should they be using the book for? I mean, I go through it. I like there's a lot of charts and figures and graphs. I think they're very helpful. But you just mentioned every year they should go through the exercise. Well, how should they, in a perfect world in your mind, use the book?
Yeah, well, so in the book, I've outlined probably 70% of the full self-assessment that we
Yeah.
take advisors that we are privileged to counsel through. So the first step is either to read the book because it sort of lays out the thinking, how to really think about it. That's number one. But number two, if you do nothing else, read the chapter. There are two chapters about that really talk about the self-assessment. The first chapter lays out the questions themselves, and the second chapter sort of helps you think through how to assess or evaluate your answers. But it's what you do with that information once you've got it. In the book, I walk you through what the waterfall of possibilities or options look like and how to compare, how to think about your answers from the self-assessment and how it compares to evaluating the status quo and evaluating other options. For a lot of advisors, that's more than enough. The book details enough what you need to do in order to sort of determine if you're in the right place. But for many people, they want more than that. And whether it be calling me or anyone else, I certainly would be delighted to talk with anyone, whether they think they want to move or not, just to really, we call it gratuitous education, to educate them on how to think through, how to optimize their business. And that's the key to the book. I didn't write the book talking to those that are thinking about moving. I wrote the book for every advisor who wants to optimize their business. And
Yeah.
that should be every advisor. Because the thing that's changed the most in the industry is advisor mindset in the last number of years. Advisors went from thinking themselves as just an employee at the will and mercy of whatever firm they work for, to no matter where they practice, thinking about their business as a business owner and believing that they have the right to agency over that business. So if you believe that, you have the right to maximize its value and challenge whether retiring through UBS's Alpha Retire and Place program is the right thing to do.
Right.
To challenge whether Merrill Lynch has the best technology and challenge a million other things. And then you decide whether you're in the right place or you need to go elsewhere.
So in my mind, that assessment, I agree, that's the key. That's the key tool in the book. But what other takeaways? Like, what other one or two things would you say, are important?
Yeah, so I think one thing we talk about a lot, I talk about a lot with the advisors I counsel and in the book, is the concept of better enough.
Yeah.
So you go through this self-assessment, you compare it to what's out there, and I guarantee you that in any situation, in any compare and contrast, you could find 5 firms that are better at certain things, better at offering you certain value adds over what you have now. But that doesn't mean you should move. What should make you want to move or consider a move is if on par, an opportunity or a model offers you an opportunity that is better enough, more than marginally better enough, needle moving enough than what you have. So not just better, but better enough in meeting the goals that you've outlined or gotten clear about with respect to the self-assessment. The other thing is that, and there's a million takeaways, but probably the other really profound one that's important is that while no advisor would move or should move without paying heed to the personal financial considerations of a move, whether it be a transition package being offered by way of going from one big firm to another, or the economics of independence. It's not that the economics or personal financial gain are unimportant, but it can't and shouldn't ever be the primary or first or only driver for a move. It should be.
We've seen a lot of problems, and you've seen over the years a lot of problems. You're driven by, by money and its complications.
Yeah. And so an advisor, if I'm telling you that an advisor should be thinking about their business as a business, if they're going to move, they have the right to expect to monetize that business or de-risk the move. So I'm not saying that transition money is unimportant or the economics or the net payout is irrelevant. I'm just saying that I just did a podcast interview for my own podcast yesterday with Tony Smith, who now runs a $20 million, $6 billion independent firm in Alabama. And he talked about the fact that the most important thing is to think about, if you're thinking about whether making a move or doing anything, it needs to be clients first, business second, personal financial gain third. And I believe that. It's not that you take yourself out of the equation. It just can't be the main driver for anything you do.
And also this is a long game for most people, right? So you got to think this bird in the hand versus what can we get, down the road. And that was the initial thing, if you remember, because we were both sort of, trying to get into the independent world. We had to really educate people. 10, 15 years ago, people didn't understand it. And you had to really talk about, this is what are your goals? Where do you want to be? This is why this is better. There was a lot of education.
Well, not only a lot of education, but I think to this day, even though independence, the world of independence has become more mainstream and there's more proof of concept and there's more ways, more people to talk to. My own podcast is all about, called the Diamond Podcast for Financial Advisors. It's all about interviewing top advisors that have made the move to talk about what it means. So there's more information available. But the biggest thing, and one of the questions that's really pivotal in our self-assessment, is asking an advisor whether they're more focused, the short-term upside is more important than the long-term. If you are interested in independence, you would need to really be long-term greedy. You would need to value the notion of building a legacy, building enterprise value, building something that you can ultimately sell, the capital gains treatment as opposed to ordinary income. That's not for everyone, nor should it be. And that's part of know thyself. So many people go out and explore and start meeting with custodians and looking at real estate, and all of that is great. Knowledge is power, and it's all data points. But if you haven't reconciled the fact that you can't live with little to no transition money or significantly less transition money up front, and you're more concerned about that, or you owe X amount of money to your firm and you're not willing to come out of pocket for it, then independence is the wrong route to pursue.
Right. Well, I guess the sort of, believe it or not, we're coming towards an end here, but what did final kind of thoughts would be, what did you learn from writing the book? I mean, right, how do you apply some of those lessons to yourself, and what did you learn as you put it together?
Yeah. So the first chapter in the book is called The Parable of the Trapeze, and it is based on a parable written by an author named Danon Parry. You asked me why people should read the book. That parable of the trapeze, when I first read it, rocked my world. And I write about it in the book because it is the best metaphor for the way advisors need to think about their life. And what I learned from it was it really sort of forced me to think about the parable. It talks about how we all sort of are swinging along on our current trapeze bar, comfortably uncomfortable, because no one is ever perfectly comfortable. And it's good enough. I'm doing my thing. I'm making enough money. It's fine. And all of a sudden, as if out of nowhere, a new trapeze bar appears ahead of me. How come I never saw it before? But suddenly I see it. And now I can't unsee it. That trapeze bar begins to beckon me. That has entrepreneurial spirit. It has greater freedom. It has more money. It has better technology, whatever it is you're looking to solve for. And it's up to you then to decide what you do with that. Do I grab for it? Terrifying. And that's what I learned from the book. That space, that leap that someone needs to take between the current comfortably uncomfortable trapeze bar and grabbing for the next one is white space, scary as hell. For me to write this book, it felt like I was standing naked. It got published, it appeared on Amazon, and I felt nauseous. Oh my God. Yes, I've counseled people like this, one advisor at a time for years. I've spoken at conferences, I've been a writer, I do a podcast, but it's all sort of private, if you will. Writing the book was a big swing for me, and that untethered space felt scary. But I knew I had something to say. I'm glad I said it. I'm glad I reached for that next trapeze bar. And my hope for anyone who's listening is that they do just that. Never hang on to a comfortably uncomfortable trapeze bar out of inertia. Hang on because it's right for you, because it serves you. Don't hang on because you believe there's nothing better or you don't deserve better.
Well, I think that's a good point to end on because I agree. And I think that, I found that I don't have a book of business anymore, but I thought the book was still applicable for me. It was great to read. And the self-assessment stuff is always good to know.
Thank
So, Mindy, thanks for doing it. Thanks for what you do for the industry. We appreciate you, and we'll talk again.
I appreciate you as well. Thanks, Tony, very much.